You know you have a friend when they will listen to you. You know you have a friend who will come around to your parties. But you know you have a great friend when they will stand in the breach and stand up for you even when times you're unwilling to ask or expect it. And the California Republican Party, really the nation, has one of the great friends in Congressman Darrell Issa. There's not a single time that I have called that he hasn't been willing to come and speak to us. You know, at the national level, he is facing an administration that could not be less transparent. Yet it is up to one man to stand up in many ways to hold them accountable. And he assured me again today, as he has every time, we are not going to give up. On Benghazi, to find the truth, he's not going to give up on Fast and Furious. He's certainly going to talk to us about that. He'll probably talk to us about the sequester, which had very far-reaching results. You're aware that the Pope recently stepped down over that. But a guy who's always going to stand up for us, and honorary Congressman Darrell Issa.
Now I want you to know I'm Orthodox Catholic, so my patriarch passed away a little while ago and is in the process of being replaced. So, Tom, I'm sorry that I take no, I'm not going to do an investigation on the Pope's resignation. I'm going to leave that for others. As you know, the President said that it was necessary to do the lack of funds. You got more laughs on the same joke. I don't get it. When we talk politics, we don't talk about what we get from our government. We talk about what the government takes from us. The difference between us and the other party. We're the party of freedom. Do we want to make sure that our country defends our freedom? Of course. And as we see sequestration all around us, it seems amazing to all of us that the President's favorite places to say things are going to stop is in fact stop defending our nation. The defense budget's about $600 billion. It's a lot of money. But it's $3.5 trillion for spending. Put it in perspective, if you laid off the entire military, grounded all the aircraft, and had no national defense whatsoever, you take care of half the deficit, but only half. The answer to, in fact, controlling the growth of government does not lie in the U.S. military. Now, people get up here all the time, they talk to you about their favorite president was Ronald Reagan. I could do that too, and I wouldn't be far off. But in fact, my favorite president, now that I've gotten to understand the tough time that he orchestrated over physically with a large bureaucracy, with a government that needed to be shrunk, was Dwight David Eisenhower. He faced a similar situation. World War II had ended. They hollowed out the military. He was facing a great threat, one that had to be addressed, and he felt an obligation to constrain the spending of government to the revenue of government. So for 8 years, he delivered peace, security, fought off the Soviets at every corner and every front, invested in the future of the systems that ultimately would make us safe, and did so while balancing the budget. That's something that today, the party of Reagan and Lincoln need to also be the party of fiscal responsibility. Now, I know numbers are the worst thing for a politician to use, or for that matter, anyone except, say, maybe Charles Munger. Charles, you're just good with it, you really are. But I'm just going to give you a couple of things. When we had taxes far higher than they are today, because except on the top 2%, taxes on everyone else in America technically been lowered. The revenue of government, this is the year 2000, the revenue was $2 trillion almost to the penny, 2.03. So, you know, that 03 trillion, you and I would enjoy having it personally. We probably could spend it well, but it's a small amount. We had 2 trillion in revenue. Spending that year, the last year of Clinton, 1.79, or call it 1.8. 2 trillion of revenue, 1.8 trillion of spending. Why are we in trouble? Why do we have a deficit of 1.2 trillion? Because last year, that 2 trillion had risen to 2.5 trillion, a 25% increase in revenue to the federal government. This is after all the things that Carl told you about were so awful. Personal family income dropping, which drops the potential and so on. The fact is, in these years, in 12 years, we've had 25% growth in revenue to the federal government. Unfortunately, the 1.8 trillion is 3.5 trillion today. It's that simple. We spent our way into insolvency. Nothing more, nothing less. Now, the interesting thing was when when spending was $1.8 trillion, defense was actually higher than it is today. Defense is in real dollars smaller than it was then. The president says there's nothing he can really do except ask for a tax increase. You know, this president would never be disingenuous. We know that. This side knows it. Just as we know that he didn't want a tax increase, he needs a tax increase. Of course, when he got his tax increase in January, he never mentioned that just a few months later, as he agreed to do sequestration in less than 60 days, that it was going to be another tax increase. Now, you would have thought that he would have thought further ahead than on January 1st, when he got a very large tax increase. You would have thought he would have already known that he was going to need one to take care of a bill that he signed 18 months earlier in which he agreed to cuts without a tax increase. Guess it fell through the cracks. You know, that happens in a busy office. Let me just give you a couple of items, though, and they're not about money. They're small dollars, but I think they're important for all of us to look at. Carl Rove mentioned some interesting areas we could save all of that budget. I'm from a committee that often looks at small amounts. Those 2 mismatched wine glasses that you remember one of the GSA officials having at his bathtub in that picture. Now, you all knew there was 2 wine glasses. Did you notice that they didn't match? Again, it wasn't that much money. Didn't even get really good wine goblets for that picture. But in reality, the 9 trips it took back and forth to Las Vegas to make sure they have that event at just the right place with his family for vacations. Some might say that there's a few pennies there you could cut. And even if it's a few pennies, shouldn't we cut it? Now, right, last week we discovered that they spent, since that period of time, since the GSA scandal, $15.5 billion on travel. Now, we can't look at every nuance of that, so our committee said, well, just tell us about the conference that cost over $100,000. And is Doug Ossie still here? Doug is. Here's a guy that's drilled down on some of these numbers over the years, and I understand there's a rumor he may drill down on them again. We'll wait to see if he, have you got it in you? Are you going to pull the trigger? Okay, I mean, this is your chance to make news. Come on, you've all had Carl telling you this could be the real news. You can eclipse Carl's entire speech. Carl is still back there somewhere. She'll report it. Okay, we'll leave that to the end of my speech. But since that time, $340 million was spent just on conferences that cost over $100,000. Now, I'm just going to tell you about one of them. Just one. You all probably are not inside the Beltway enough, but again, I pointed to Doug because he is. The Office of Personnel Management is the part of government that makes the rules for people and how they spend the money. It really is sort of the what's ethical, what's right, what's wrong group. And within the Office of Personnel Management, there's an Inspector General. Now, his job is, of course, to oversee, to make sure that legal and ethical, that group that oversees the rest of us for legal and ethical. The Inspector General, after the GSA scandal, spent $150,000 on a conference. Almost all the people, a great many of the people that went there were Washingtonians, and they had it at a Washington hotel. It sounds good. They spent more money per person than they spent in Las Vegas, but the interesting thing is 1/3 of the expenses, $53,000, was paid to an outside consultant on a no-bid basis to, in fact, plan the event of Washington people going for 2 days to a Washington hotel to talk about how they would maintain ethical and honest and frugal America. My theory is